can a piece of music actually really have an impact? Can it spark change, direct change, tangible change? And I'm always no, but music can help foster a community who is more likely to engage with direct change.
I look up to you a lot. I don't know if you know this, but I think I reached out to you a long time ago, but when I heard your piece, Bombs of Beirut, at USC, I was like, I think I was like a sophomore or something. So I was like totally green to new music and stuff like that. But when I heard, I think it was Kronos Quartet that played it at the Bovard Auditorium, which is like the big auditorium at USC. It was the first time I heard anything like that. So I was really not just because I'm Lebanese, but also just the nature of the piece, the how dynamic the piece was all throughout, and even like the bombs dropping, that was really surprising. And it wasn't like a gimmicky thing or anything like that. It worked really well, and it was at the spot that you heard that you needed it.
Thank you.
As well. So I wanted to know a little bit about that piece first, and then we'll move on to some of the other things.
Yeah.
But that was like my first introduction to you.
Oh, wow.
And that was like 10 years ago. So this is crazy for me to do.
It's funny, that piece, like I did a podcast a long time ago called One Track, where the idea is that composers are asked, if you had to pick one piece for somebody to have an introduction to your work, what would you pick? And I was like, oh, it's going to be Bombs of Beirut in a heartbeat. And then when you asked me to be on this show, I had to actually tell myself, don't bring in Bombs of Beirut, like bring in something else.
Right.
Just like, how can I even stretch what I share to represent my sound? But Bombs of Beirut it was a very special piece for me. One, in that I had been exploring documentary elements in music making before that, but through field recordings, and I hadn't done it through interviews until that piece. And once I did that, interviewing family and friends who had gone through the Lebanese Civil War, that really ignited a long-lasting curiosity in integrating interviews and most of my concert music at this point now. But that piece being written for the Kronos Quartet and being commissioned to write it when I was 29 and a little, we're so fearless in our 20s. And David Harrington, the first violinist, said, do something that feels like a stretch, that kind of freaks you out a little bit, in his more eloquent words, of course. And I thought, well, putting bombs in the middle of a piece would be really risky.
Oh, so that was the first thought of it? That was the impetus of the piece? It didn't come later? It was okay, how do I build a piece around that?
How do I build a piece around that?
I didn't know that. Okay.
Because I have a family member whose dad used to be a sound recordist for like Beirut News, and his dad had put out a tape recorder on his apartment balcony in the late 70s and would just gather these recordings, and that was given to me a few years earlier, and I had been sitting on it of how can I possibly use this? And also it's tricky, like you said, it could be gimmicky and it could feel like exploitation, and maybe it does to some people in hearing it, but it also felt so important, especially then, for audiences here to actually hear what war sounds like through civilian ears, not through the news or movies or anything, but just what does it actually sound like to have a tape recorder out on a balcony? And so I was trying to create space around that. But it was tricky because also I've seen so many of those performances now, and I've seen a couple people leave during that section. And I don't know, I have a feeling that it's not people who have experienced war and are leaving because it's too close to home. We have a lot of like trigger warnings for that, but I think it's that it can actually just feel overwhelming to hear, especially when it's so loud. I mean, I don't know, what was your experience, if you can remember?
It felt overwhelming for me, but it was more, I mean, because I'm a music nerd, part of it is also like, wow, like how how that what an amazing shape also, like I'm in awe of
Oh,
also the piece itself, not just the sounds, but
yeah,
how it all came together, because if you put those sounds in the beginning of the piece, yeah, I'm sure
sure.
people would just probably zone out
Hmm.
after hearing it for a minute or so. But
Yeah.
I think where you put it in the piece and what came before it and what came after it, and I actually just listened to it again recently, the whole thing, and I
Oh.
thought, yeah, I still remember how I felt the first time I heard it. So we're gonna hear a couple
Bomb
minutes
goes
from
off,
Bombs of Beirut.
and the shockwave from this bomb just rushed through me. And I open my eyes and I just see the room swaying like a wave almost. I can see the air in the room. Waves in and out.
You know it's going and it's gonna hit, and as soon as it hits, you can hear those sounds. Very powerful.
And the whistling sound.
I can hear it, for example, it's like very loud thunderstorms. You see something that is just passing that way right out of the wall. If it's at night, you can feel the fire, the light coming out of the room.
When I first hear of a composer, especially at that age, because I was like 20 years old. So
Mhm.
every time I hear a first piece of a composer, it sticks with me because it's like a uh,
Yeah.
memory piece, I guess,
Yeah. Yeah.
or a point in time. It's like when you hear people talk about rock songs or whatever that they heard when they were young or
Yeah.
anything like that. That's for me, your piece is one of those kind of pieces.
Oh.
And part of it also is because I'm Lebanese, but also another part of it too was just to hear a piece by a young person, at that time was also really inspiring. Like
Yeah.
maybe more inspiring than if I heard a, older composer uh,
Hmm.
with that piece.
Just
If
like
that
a
makes
living
sense.
composer who's close in your
Close to age.
trajectory, and
Yeah.
yeah, it is really important. Um, I wish I guess I sort of had that once I started college. I wish I had that in high school a little earlier. I'm so I find myself often being so jealous of my students here in New York, because New York kids are exposed to living music. Like they just inevitably, in living in New York, you are exposed to everything going on around Carnegie Hall or just at anywhere. Like living music is a thing. But growing up in the East Bay, California as a teenager, it was Yanni. Yanni was my living composer exposure. And I like can't help but think what it could have been like uh, to be exposed to new music in those incredibly formative years. So yeah, so those first exposures of someone doing something new who's close in your age that feels like a real
So
person,
when
they're
did you
important.
decide then to be a composer? Was that something that happened later, or because at least for me, it was like I knew when I was like 7. It was
You did?
for me, it was a weird thing. I
How?
thought it was a normal thing actually until I got older. Like, wait, people don't know that they want to be composers until like
Wow.
maybe they're in their 20s.
Yeah.
But for you, when was that?
Um, when I was applying for college, but I,
Yeah, that's what I usually hear. Yeah, something like that.
yeah, it was, um, I mean, I had been studying music since I was a kid, but it was piano lessons and organ lessons. And I guess I just lived in enough of a bubble where I thought that if I majored in music, that I will only have the avenue of being a piano teacher. And at that time, piano teachers are amazing, but I hated piano lessons, so I didn't want to be a piano teacher. And then I started getting more into movies, and I saw, it's like, it's the cheesiest thing, but whatever, I'll stick by this story. I saw the movie Rudy. Do you know this movie?
The
It's a football movie.
is it the one with what's his name?
I never remember his name. He played a hobbit in Lord of the Rings. He
Then
also
I
ran the
don't
New York
know.
City Marathon the same year I did, and I
Then
ran
I
a
don't know
little
this one.
faster than
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, we both ran really
I'll put it up on
slowly.
I'll put it up on the screen. It's okay.
But Rudy has this really beautiful score by Jerry Goldsmith, and I loved the score, and especially at that age, just like big movie scores were so impactful and written by living composers. So I thought, well, I could do film music. So I changed my bio major to music in my applications and didn't get in anywhere that required a composition audition because my first pieces were part of my
Part of the
audition.
application. Yeah.
Yeah, of like, okay, I guess I'm writing an orchestra piece, but I don't know how to notate an orchestra piece. And I was really lucky to just get into UCSD where you just say that you're a music major. You don't have to audition for it. And that has such an amazing, beautifully experimental music program that I just kind of landed somewhere awesome.
The USD is really common now with the PhD program. I mean they're known for the PhD program, which is
UCSD's PhD is pretty
so as an undergrad,
awesome.
are you like for the people out there that are watching because they want to go to a school? I mean, is
Yeah.
UCSD a place? Can you interact with the doctorate students as an undergrad? Can you be
Yeah.
part of like the composition environment there, or is it kind of separated? Because I know at some
No,
places it could be
it could
pretty
be.
separated.
I think, I mean, it was a long time that I went there, but I think that this has still stayed true. It was the most kind of fluid music department, whereas an undergrad, even an undergrad who wasn't a music major, because all of the composition classes were open to any major. So anyone who was writing something for composition would have the doctoral students performing their pieces, faculty, and that's an amazing faculty to have performing her works. And it all was through this spirit of generosity. No one paid each other. Like we'd get each other gift cards to the coffee cart that would be outside of the music department. But
Wow.
everyone just kind of assumed we're all going to create each other's works together. And I'm so grateful for that. That's like to have people playing your music who are really good and also just are generous. I think that spirit of generosity and collaboration has stayed with me now, and that still feels surprising to me, although it shouldn't, but it still feels surprising to me if I'm at a music school where it feels competitive with one another, or that people are so protective and don't want to play on somebody else's pieces, which I get, everyone's managing their time, but it doesn't, it's not always conducive to creating collaborative work together. So yeah, it was awesome. I mean, strongly recommend that program.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that you can do composition as an under or like there's an avenue for it, let's say, but it
Yeah.
wasn't a composition major per se.
No, no,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. I
Yeah.
wonder if it's like that. Is it still like that now? Do you
I don't
know?
know. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you would declare yourself as a music major and then you would kind of pin down your focus, and you could take a year of composition class, and then you would then your junior year audition for private composition lessons your senior year. And those were, I mean, I was lucky. I studied with Steve Takasugi and Haya Chernowin over there, and she's now at Harvard. But to have those beautifully weird minds shaping your music making in your young 20s is pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. Of course, and you got to stay also in California, which is what I also did for my undergrad too. And
Yeah,
I think something about California as a young person
yeah,
too is conducive to like not worrying about what other people think of you and things like that. Because
yeah.
as soon as like going to the East Coast, I was like, I don't know how you were, because I guess we have similar paths because we
Yeah.
started in California and then we went to the East Coast. What was that like moving to the East Coast after UC? I'm assuming it was right after UCSD or
Yeah, yeah.
how was the transition? Because at least for me, it was very difficult.
Yeah, it was hard. I moved to do a film scoring master's at NYU, and I hated New York. I hated it. It's hard to live here. Like paying rent was hard. Rent was so expensive. I lived in a tiny, tiny little like 400 square foot apartment, and I've never paid more rent for anything in my life than that. And I was sheltered, and I lived too close to NYU, and now I'd say just move out a little further. Anyway, it just felt really hard, and it was a 2-year program, and I accelerated it into a 1.5 years so I could leave as fast as possible.
Oh, really?
And then I moved to LA, lived there for a few years, and really missed New York. I love LA. I know you're from the LA area, but I missed just like the access to so many cultural happenings in a small space. So I moved back in 2010, and the entire new music climate felt so different, and it felt so welcoming, and all these ensembles sprouted up, and different venues had sprouted up, and
You're talking about in LA.
here,
In New York.
yeah, around
Okay,
2010,
okay.
like Le Poisson Rouge and even Roulette had like moved to a new space, and all these, Ice Ensemble was just a baby then, and there was like an energy around
So
that
you've been
time.
here since 2010 then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I've been here since 2014.
Okay.
So we're both these California
Yeah.
transplants that don't look like we're coming back anytime soon.
Yeah, right.
But
What was
I
it like for you, like when you came here?
when I came here, I wanted to get out. I actually sat and was, I don't tell many people this, but during the first semester, I made a list of pros and cons of what it would be like if I left Juilliard.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was that unenjoyable, to be honest with
yeah.
you. But it got better after. It got
Okay.
better like a year in, I would say. It
Yeah,
just was an adjustment that I wasn't used to.
yeah,
But
yeah.
now look, we're both still here,
Here we are.
10 years plus later,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
You were talking earlier about this idea of using, documentary style interviews and things like that.
Hmm.
And it's interesting that you were a film scoring major for a time,
Hmm.
but you're still using those skills, of course, when you're
Hmm.
composing new music. So I want to play a couple minutes from this really amazing piece called Paper Planes, which you do this.
Paper Pianos. Close.
God, why did I write Paper
Well, Paper
Planes?
Planes is an excellent title for a piece.
I'm
It
so
could be the
stupid.
sequel.
Sorry. Let me do that again.
Okay.
You know what? Maybe I'll just keep it in. It's piano.
It's fine.
It's paper pianos, not paper planes. I'll just keep it in. Okay, let's listen to it.
It
God.
really affects on a 5-year-old children to see that kind of thing. Still, when I hear some extreme loud sounds, like it makes me like sometimes mad, because I can't bear that.
Sending your daughter to school that's like probably 10 miles and you have to walk. My mom was concerned about my safety.
And also there was lots of bullets in our yard, because when the Taliban had been fighting and then some of the bullets coming to our yard, so we have been playing with that bullets. They used to play with mine. They didn't know what does it look like. I mean, most of the mines, if you see it, looks like something like a plaything or a doll, something, or a pen.
Like it's very rare for me to see people, like for me also, I'm really influenced by film music as well, but you seem to be more influenced by the storytelling aspect of it and less so the musical aspect of it. And I really want to know how that all happened, because I feel, at least in like the last orchestra piece I wrote, I was using these big filmic kind of chords, but there's not really a storytelling element, and I feel like that's the part that's the most difficult about writing film music or whatever you want to call it, like or music in general. Like, how do you tell a story?
Yeah, yeah.
And you do it in a way I haven't heard anyone else do it before. So how did I
Uh,
know it started with Bombs of Beirut, but
yeah, yeah.
how did that change over time to what we heard here?
To this.
Yeah.
Oh man. I mean, in a very similar way, it is similar to Bombs of Beirut in that there are interviews that I conducted with people. Although this one I co-conducted with Nigel Meister, who's the stage director for Paper Pianos. But it's longer. It's longer. It's 90 minutes. And I think the good thing about a 90-minute work is that I can't just have people talking for 90 minutes straight. I can have breaks between their testimonies, which means that there is space for the music to say something that isn't in the text itself. So in a way, this feels more not playful in tone, but playful in process, and that I felt like I had more freedom to let the music be in the primary focus for moments, whereas in a piece like Bombs of Beirut, because the text is so dense, the music really has to live in the space where it's serving the text and kind of staying, still having a voice, but staying mostly out of the way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely noticed that too. It feels like they're both like on equal footing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Whereas, yeah, definitely Bombs of Beirut almost sounded like almost like a kind of a soundtrack
mm-hmm.
to a time, whereas
Yeah.
this is like they're both equal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and later on in the piece too, not to get like nerdy about the score, but I was like looking at the top of this the winds where the winds are. I'm like, are they singing also too?
Oh, the winds?
So are they?
Oh, I don't think the winds are. Oh, some of them are. Yeah. The oboist is
Yeah, right
singing. The
here
bassoonist also sings.
near the
Um,
end of the excerpt.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So the amazing thing about Alarmal Sound is that no one's just an instrumentalist. They're really amazing singers. They're actors. They do movement, and all of it really, really well. So in writing a piece for them, I wanted to make use of their voice. Also, singing voice is important to me because it ends up being a timbral bridge between the instrumental ensemble and also the spoken word. It like creates almost this very humanized glue between those two worlds. I hope so anyway.
And they're like, look, does it matter? I mean, with this recording, it seemed it was mixed, studio mixed, and all that, right? It's not a live.
Oh, it's live.
Is it
Yeah,
live?
it's
Really?
live. Yeah, it's live at MPAC. So all of the performers, nearly all of the time, are moving while they're playing.
I can't
But
believe
they're
that
on
was a live
cordless.
recording. Okay, but are
Yeah.
each of them mic'd? Is that how you can get the balance? Okay,
Yeah, so Daniel Neumann is their sound engineer, and he is a wizard. So
okay, it
he
sounds like a
mixed
studio
this.
recording.
I know.
Yeah,
It sounds
because if
really
you had
good.
those people, those winds singing where they usually sit, I mean, you wouldn't be able to hear them, or there would
No.
be kind of in the background. But these, I thought they
Mhm.
were like opera. I'm like, wait, there's no opera
Oh
singers
yeah, yeah, yeah.
in
They
this
had
one.
headset mics. They had headset mics, and then the violins were singing into their DPAs.
hmm So,
Mhm.
like, what's the process like when you're doing a piece like this? So you have these, basically, they're pseudo like field recordings, right?
Yeah,
In a
this
way,
one, oh, the interviews to
yeah,
treat them like field recordings.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, do those come? Like,
Mhm.
what comes first? Does that come first? Does the music come first? Does the
Oh
overall
yeah.
idea come first, or do you like you're recording all these people, but you don't know what the idea is? Like, I've never done
Yeah.
anything like this before, so I
Yeah.
have no idea how you would even start.
It's hard. It's hard. Um, this piece came together in bits and pieces because in 2016, two things happened in 2016. One, I'd applied for Alarmal Sound's Mizzou International Composers Festival, where they do a call for scores and then they commission like young composers to write a new piece for them. And at the same time as getting that commission, their bassoonist, Mike Harley, his family member is an immigration lawyer. And she had sent an email to Mike to send to the group, which got forwarded to me saying that a refugee from Afghanistan has just come to New York. He's a pianist and he needs a piano to play on. And I have an upright piano that I never practice. So I said he can come and practice on my piano. And we met and he told me his story, which inspired Paper Pianos, about how how he grew up in Kabul, Afghanistan, and was targeted by the Taliban for being a musician because music and art is forbidden, and how he taught himself how to play piano by drawing the keys on a piece of paper and silently practicing. And it started with a smaller piece just around him, Milad Yusufi, who's in New York and is a wonderful composer and pianist, thriving and doing very well. And then it grew from there. I asked Alarm Will Sound if this is a good collaboration for you. Can we imagine growing this piece out? And once I got paired with Nigel Meister, the director who's based in Rochester, he said, you know what, why don't we interview some more folks? Rochester is a really big center for refugees. Like most refugees who come into New York get put to Buffalo, Rochester, West New York. So we worked with resettlement organizations and interviewed some more people and then built the piece out from that. So there was a general idea of this could be a piece around the refugee crisis and people coming to New York and what that experience is like. But to actually figure out what the piece is can't happen until you've talked to people and you've done the interviews, because people surprise you with what they want to share. Even things like, I thought with the resettlement workers who are also refugees, they tend to also be refugees because they know the process, so they want to pay it forward and help others, that some of these would be difficult things to share. Like if I ask a question, is that going to be hard to navigate? But they've practiced it so many times, and there's almost like a lack of emotional delivery to people who have had to do interviews a number of times. So then how do you then allow the music to sort of make up for that, like for the flatness of delivery too? I had this in Bombs of Beirut too, where I asked my mom, like, what was the Lebanese Civil War like? And she said, well, you know, I was in the hospital giving birth to your brother, and then bombs went off in the hospital, so they had to move us. I'm like, Mom, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's so
Like,
matter
that's
of
a big
fact.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a very, like, almost a detached way of sharing that experience.
Yeah, my grandparents were the same way
Yeah.
too, like getting out of the Lebanese Civil War, like, or actually they
Yeah.
just never talked about it.
Yeah,
That's just,
exactly.
why would you even bring it up?
Yeah,
Like, why
yeah.
why are you interested in that,
Yeah. Would you ask them though? Like when you would ask questions, would they share things?
They wouldn't really share, they just don't want to really talk about it. But now
Yeah.
they're passed away, so it's too late to press them more, but
Yeah.
they yeah, it's just something that they, and it's something that I personally don't even know how to even start dealing with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
But so when you're, I'm also kind of amazed how organic, like I hate to use that word, but in this case, it really is that organic, how this whole process starts, almost like serendipitous too, that you meet this man that comes and that needs
Yeah.
a piano,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's just something as simple as that could
Yeah.
become this whole journey.
Oh, and it's bigger than this piece too. This piece has become a part of his immigration case because Milad had to prove impact on his local community. So this evidence of this piece and him contributing in some way became a part of that too. And also spiraled into other things as people heard about this project and heard about Milad's story. Other people from the music community stepped in to help him out. Like, okay, how do we get him into the new school to study piano performance? How do we actually get him his own piano? And all of these amazing musicians really made things happen.
It's hard to find pieces that actually make a kind of like real impact like that, other than
Yeah.
like pieces like my experience was when I
Yeah.
heard your piece was
Oh,
like
yeah.
more of like, oh, that inspires me to keep going as a composer. But what
Sure.
you did is inspiring, like not inspiring, like because of you, this guy is here in a way,
It's
or you're
well,
helping him stay
helping him,
here.
yeah,
Let's
helping
say
him
that,
stay
yeah,
here.
yeah.
It's not. I wish every piece had that kind of direct impact, but this also, I mean, this raises a question of like, can a piece of music actually really have an impact? Can it spark change, direct change, tangible change? And I'm always of the, like, generally I'm of the no, but music, especially writing so many kind of political pieces, but music can help foster a community who is more likely to engage with direct change. But this particular piece has had really wonderful concrete effects. And I hope also in getting attention for the resettlement organizations too, that participated and offered their interviews.
When people say like music, like it's a good topic to kind of talk about, but when people say, "Oh, music can't change things," well, they're putting too much on. I think they're putting too much pressure on music. I think in
Yeah,
general,
yeah.
and in fact, I think most people in general can't really change things either, just in general. But you can make a change in a small way in a
Yeah.
local way,
And things
and then things will
snowball
build
and
off of that based off of your enthusiasm for that.
yeah.
Because when people start to think, "Oh, I can't make a difference," yeah, when you're thinking in a huge way, of course you can't.
Yeah, yeah.
Only like a handful of people,
Yeah.
maybe not a handful, but maybe a few hundred people in the world maybe are making that kind of
Yeah.
global difference. But that's not how we should be thinking. Otherwise, we'll go crazy.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I want to change gears then
Sure.
because I have in this little packet here that I printed out. I have another amazing excerpt to share, and this is Adoration. I'm going to play a
yes.
couple minutes of this. This is from the scene called Motivation.
You are wondering about my motivation. Why I didn't tell anyone before. I only found out a few months ago myself. My grandpa, before he died, he answered a lot of questions. I've kept this video as a reminder. You have to believe me, Simon. Your father was a killer.
No, with this piece, it has like when you hear all three of these pieces, it's obvious that it's from the same person. So that's that part of it is clear. But with this piece, you're actually using like operatic singers. That's the big difference here. So what made that switch from doing that kind of more like let's say field recording style to this? Okay, now we're gonna use Western like bel canto type of singing in this format.
Yeah. Curiosity.
Yeah.
Curiosity. I think also I had worked on a smaller piece with the librettist Royce Fabric, just like a little song cycle, and we had been wanting to do something bigger and had befriended Beth Morrison from Beth Morrison Projects, and Beth is really great about, I think she gets a lot of excitement about giving composers their first opera commission. So this was back in, we started talking back in 2017 and applying for grants, and I think officially started in 2018. It's been a long process for this opera that just premiered in January.
And you're getting it performed again with the LA Opera.
Yeah.
But that will be next year.
Yeah, in February
Right, so it has
of
a
25.
little bit of a life. Well, not a little bit of a life. It's a big life.
It's a
going
big
from
life.
going to the West Coast.
I'm really
Well, your opera's going to the
excited.
West Coast, but you're not.
I know. Well, I'll go for a little
Well,
bit
you'll
for
go.
that.
You'll
Yeah,
go for
but
that.
I'm planting my feet here in New York.
But the story about this piece is it's pseudo. I mean, it's pseudo related to your other work, but this has a much different. I mean, this is a fictional story, first of all, not based on real events in a
Uh,
way.
Mostly fictional,
Okay.
but inspired by a real event. So the idea of this, and I hope one day I get the compact elevator pitch of what this opera is about, but it's based off of an Adam McGoyan film, which means that it's an incredibly complicated plot. But essentially, a high school boy who has lost his parents to a car accident. It's not a spoiler alert. We know that in the opera. He gets an assignment from his teacher at school to basically appropriate a news story and convince his classmates that that news story is how his parents died. And the news story is based off of a real life news story, which is the Hindawi affair, in which a man plants a bomb on his pregnant wife's suitcase as she's flying to Tel Aviv. So this high school boy convinces his class that his father was trying to do the same thing to his mother when she was pregnant with him, and it just reveals a lot of really difficult conversations around racism within his own family, within his class. And then these conversations are all done in chat rooms. So everything goes viral and those conversations go out into a larger community. So it does end up talking about a lot of similar things to my documentary pieces around how we view conflict and communities, particularly from Arab regions. But also, since it is done with like a screenplay, an adapted screenplay, there's more space to actually play with the text. I don't have to be as respectful of the text because I want to be respectful of Royce's words because they're thoughtful, but I can do things with those words and have the freedom to do them because they're not somebody's testimony. So it meant a lot of experimentation for me. It also was really hard. Opera is hard. Have you written an opera before?
Oh, no, 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 no,
God,
no.
they're so
I would never
hard.
do it unless
They're
it was something more streamlined, but I don't see how it could be streamlined. It's supposed to be a messy
I
process.
suppose so, yeah. But then there are composers who will write one after another, and I am excited to do another one, but I am also excited for this break in
Yeah.
between, because it's a space to really, like, I think about who I was in 2018 when I started this, and my musical language even in 2018, which is similar but not the same, and who I was not who I am now. So you change as a person over the course of writing a project like this.
I mean, then these operas, and I've spoken with people that are writing operas or have written operas, and these things take years from your life in a way. And
Yeah.
but you are working on other things while that is happening. So you're kind of working on it, and then you're kind of waiting for something to happen because it needs to go to a workshop, or
Yeah.
maybe some funds have to get
All of that.
organized, and then you're working on something else, but then you got to go back to the opera,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
maybe you want to change something creatively, but it has to stay that way
Yep.
because that's what you planned on doing 3 years ago,
Totally.
right? Is that
Totally.
all kind of,
That's all right. Yeah.
yeah.
And throw in a pandemic. So our premiere date kept getting pushed back as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
And then, things with cast change and space. And even I had a version of this opera before the pandemic that I was working on. And then during the pandemic, it just felt polite. So I scrapped so much material and started over. Yeah, it's hard, but it's really gratifying when it's done. And to go from it being such a solitary practice for so many years to all of a sudden being with a cast and with a director and with crew and projection artists and sound designers and all of those different parts.
Do you feel like you have any control over any of those other aspects, or are you the type where it's like, okay, I'm just doing the music is my responsibility and everything else, whatever they
Yeah.
kind of want to do? Or how does that work exactly? I imagine it's not like being a film composer where you're kind of on
Yeah.
the lowest
Right,
rung on the
right.
ladder and making the film. I mean, that's your music at the end of the day.
Yeah, this project, I think I think I was really lucky. One, because my producer, Beth Morrison, has been a part of it from the beginning, so she understands the tone and the vision for the piece. With Royce, it was also very collaborative. And then our director, Lane Retmer, just felt like a very organic fit for this. And she came in later, just a year before the performance, but we had so many conversations about tone and sound and surrealism and kind of abstraction. And she comes from primarily a film practice, so she was able to really bridge live theater in that filmic space. And she came with us when we workshopped this at Banff and heard essentially the whole opera before she started directing the show and got to live in that space. So with what she was doing, I felt like I didn't have to be involved. Now that it's premiered, there are a few things where we're like, okay, maybe we'll like adjust a couple things here and there, but it was nice to have someone to trust. I would rather, my dream collaborative process is that you have all of the conversations up front and kind of understand what the project is, whether you're building it from the ground up or someone else is coming in the middle, and then let that person do what they do best.
But when you decide to use the screenplay, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is always something I wonder. Is the content, let's say, something that you came up with, or is it something you're approached with? Like somebody says, "Hey, we have this idea to do this screenplay," and they have one on a list of composers there. Oh, let's ask Mary, or is it the other way? You have the project, and you have to go look for.
Yeah.
Because I feel like people that really want to do opera, I think they have to wrestle with those two paths, right?
Yeah.
And I imagine the latter one is the preferable one, where you're in the driver's seat. But
Yeah. I think it was like a shared, everyone got to be in the driver's seat in
really?
choosing this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So the things that I knew were that Royce would be working with me, that Beth would be producing, and Royce and I had really connected over our love of Adam Egoyan's films. So we brought to Beth a number of his films that we felt could adapt well into an opera. And actually, Adoration wasn't my first pick. I loved his film Calendar, which is really like experimental with time, and it's about a couple who goes to Armenia, and there's like a weird like tour guide over there, and it's like these three people in Armenia having weird conversations all kind of out of time. And I'm not even sure if I'm describing it well. It's just kind of confusing, but I think it could be a good opera. And brought that to Beth, and she was like, I don't actually see that, how that sets to the stage, but this other film you brought, Adoration, could be really, really great. And I'm glad with how she's produced so many different projects that she had that intuition, because it was a film that I think on the first watch, I also didn't fully understand how much space there was to play with the narrative, and even really didn't understand it until we were in the room with the actors and they started asking new questions that I hadn't thought of. So it's sort of, we came in with our love of Adam Egoyan, our love of telling difficult stories, and then kind of curated that together.
This week you have something going on with the New York Philharmonic. What exactly is that? And then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Oh, this is a piece that's part of their Project 19 commissioning idea, where they commissioned 19 women to write something for the Phil. This is also back 5 years ago, so it's been a long time in the making. And when I got the commission, I felt like, wow, the New York Phil is a really amazing platform to say something important. And I reached out to my friend Scout Kouyoumdjian, who is a photojournalist, and she's most known for her photos of Obama. She was with Obama for both of his terms, so a lot of like his iconic photos of him or him and Michelle were taken by Scout. But Scout also travels around the world and documents war and conflict. And she and I wanted to do a piece at that time when we met, around the impacts of the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war on Armenians that were in that territory. But since then and now, in fall of 23, the Armenians in that territory experienced a genocide and were cleansed from the area. So we created a piece that includes her photography of things that were leading up to that cleansing, And I have interviews with people who had gone through the prior wars, and also with people who had to leave Nagorno-Karabakh and were entering Armenia in the fall, about their experience loading their families and coming over with trucks and taking all of their belongings. So some of those interviews are done by me, and others are done by activists who were on the ground in the fall who wanted to contribute. So it has those interviews, it has field recordings, and Scout's really amazing photography of this displaced community.
And the ensemble itself, is it the orchestra, or is it members from the ensemble?
It's like Sinfonietta,
Oh,
essentially.
Sinfonietta, so like
Yeah.
15, 20 players. So it's going to be a big piece.
Yeah, yeah,
Great, great.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Mary, for coming on. This has been fun.
Thank
And
you.
if you're in New York, go and watch this piece.
Oh, yeah.
It's a brand new piece. Why not?
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
you.